Thank you for joining me for this Plain Talk 2021 session about phonological awareness. My name is Alisa Van Hecken, and I'm excited to be able to share this information with you today. My background as a teacher has been as a kindergarten as well as a first grade classroom teacher, and I have also worked as a kindergarten through fifth grade reading specialist, providing reading intervention support for students who are struggling readers. I often found that many of my students struggled with foundational skills, phonics, as well as phonological and phonemic awareness. Over the past few years, I have had the opportunity to focus my work just on phonological and phonemic awareness instruction. Last year, I was one of the co-authors on a book called Bridge the Gap that provides phonemic awareness intervention lessons for older learners. I'm excited to be able to talk about this topic with you today. We're going to be answering three questions. What is phonological awareness? Why is it important? And how do I teach phonological awareness in my own classroom? I'm going to begin today with an image that many of us are familiar with. Hollis Scarborough's powerful image of the reading rope shows us the many strands that are woven into skilled reading. You will see in the bottom corner of that rope under word recognition that phonological awareness has been identified as an individual strand of instruction. And as we think about phonological awareness and how it intertwines and works along with decoding and sight word recognition, we know that those are the skills that help our students to be automatic decoders of print. Phonological awareness alone is not enough for reading instruction. Hearing the sounds, working with phonological awareness activities is just one piece of our reading instruction that will help our students to have the decoding skills they need to be a skilled and fluent reader. As we think about defining that term, phonological awareness, we're going to talk about phonological as well as phonemic awareness today. Phonological awareness is a term we often see when we talk about foundational literacy skills. If you're familiar with state standards for reading foundations, we see phonological awareness standards for kindergarten and first grade classrooms. Sometimes we see them for second grade classrooms. And often in our early learning standards for preschool and early learning lessons, we see phonological awareness standards for our youngest learners as well. Phonological awareness is a broad skill that includes identifying and manipulating units of oral language. Words, syllables, onsets, and rhymes like b, ak. And we often see phonological awareness as this umbrella term where we are working with larger units of language. When we start to hear individual phonemes or sounds, it becomes phonemic awareness. Phonemic awareness is a subset of phonological awareness that focuses specifically on recognizing and manipulating sounds in words. Phonological awareness is oral and auditory. We're not expecting our littlest learners to be able to read or write compound words or multisyllabic words, but rather hear those words spoken aloud, and they would be able to respond out loud as well. Now, that subset of phonological awareness is phonemic awareness. Phonemic awareness is the understanding that spoken words are made up of individual sounds called phonemes, that smallest unit of sound. Now, phonemic awareness instruction would focus on phoneme isolation, listening for sounds at the beginning, in the middle, at the end of a word, focusing on blending sounds together, segmenting a word into individual sounds, and then manipulating or changing sounds to make new words. We often manipulate sounds by adding, deleting, or substituting sounds in words. Just like phonological awareness, phonemic awareness instruction is oral and auditory as well. We're not showing the words in print to our students. We're not expecting our students to be able to read or write any of the words. Now, phonemic awareness is often considered language play. We play with the sounds of language to make new words. When we work with phonological awareness activities, we often work with rhyming words. Or when we work with phoneme isolation, we talk about silly sentences that all begin with the same sound. Language play can be a fun and engaging part of your literacy instruction. Now, phonemic awareness is sometimes confused with the term phonics. When we think about that term phonemic awareness, we're focusing on the sounds we hear. But when we bring it into print, matching those graphemes to sounds, we are working with phonics instruction. If you remember the reading rope, phonemic awareness as phonological awareness, as well as phonics or decoding, or pieces of word recognition. Both phonemic awareness and phonics have been identified as foundational skills, but they are not the same. According to researcher Wiley Blevins, phonemic awareness training provides the foundation on which phonics instruction is built. Children need solid phonemic awareness training for phonics instruction to be effective. As we work and bring phonological and phonemic awareness instruction into our classrooms, it's important to know that phonemic awareness is not replacing phonics, but rather coming alongside it. We can't have just phonological and phonemic awareness instruction. It must be then matched into print, those sounds matched to print during our phonics instruction. Now, in phonemic awareness, our lessons are oral and auditory. Students are working with the sounds they hear. In phonics, all of those sounds are matched to print. We work with written language and print. It's both visual as well as auditory as students begin to read and write letters. Now, phonemic awareness is often a faster activity in your classroom than a phonics lesson. You might consider it to be an oral warm-up to your phonics instruction. Phonemic awareness lessons often take around 10 minutes to complete, where you might spend a little bit more time matching those sounds to print during your phonics instruction. Now, as we think about phonological awareness and phonemic awareness and how it really does come alongside and work with our phonics lessons, it's important to think about why is phonological awareness instruction so important. According to Marilyn Adams in her book, Beginning to Read, she said, the lack of phonemic awareness is the most powerful determinant of the likelihood of failure to read. This means if your students struggle to decode words when they want to read or encode words when they want to write, they're going to struggle as a reader. And as we think about Marilyn Adams' work that was published in 1990, and since that time, we have the National Reading Panel report and additional research supporting the need for phonological and phonemic awareness instruction in our classrooms. And yet, it isn't always taking place. We very often have instruction for phonics, but phonological or phonemic awareness might be peppered in throughout the day or throughout a weekly lesson plan. But what we know is that it needs to be explicit and intentional in order for our students to be phonemically aware. It's not something we can just work on every once in a while, but rather have it be that oral warm-up that comes alongside our phonics instruction. When we think about phonemic awareness, we know how important it is. And this quote here talks about how it's the most potent predictor of success in learning to read. That when we pair this alongside phonics, we truly are giving our students the foundation they need to be a reader. Louisa Moats and Carol Tolman, authors of the Letters curriculum, are experts in the area of phonology, and phonological awareness is a piece of phonology. And in their work, they talk about how phonological awareness is critical for learning to read any alphabetic writing system. And research shows that difficulty with phoneme awareness and other phonological awareness skills is a predictor of poor reading and spelling development. Even though these skills and activities we're going to talk about today are oral and auditory, they transfer into reading and spelling development as students become readers and writers. Even though we're not reading and writing within the phonemic awareness lesson, they transfer into print as we work with our literacy instruction. In fall of 2019, Louisa Moats published a blog post along the science of reading and the importance of phonemic awareness. And I just love this quote that she included. Perhaps the most critical and least practiced component of effective early instruction is phoneme awareness. Awareness of the sounds that make up spoken words, facility at manipulating those sounds, and the links between speech and print must be mastered for students to be fluent readers and accurate spellers of an alphabetic writing system like ours. As we work with these skills and bring our students this exposure and practice to the sounds of the language, we really can help them to be spellers and readers. Now, as you listen to this information and you think about your own practice as an educator, whether you teach kindergarten, first grade, maybe you're an interventionist who provides additional support, my goal is to provide you with skills and activities that you can use within your own practice and instruction to help your students to become phonemically aware. When we think about phonological and phonemic awareness skills and activities, it's important to think about different activities that we might work throughout our instruction. As I mentioned, phonemic awareness is quick. It's oral and auditory. So we're really playing with the sounds of the language in order for our students to be readers. As we work with the skill of rhyme, we work with rhyme repetition, hearing and repeating words that rhyme recognition, and then getting into the more advanced skill of producing words that rhyme. As we start to work with phoneme isolation, being able to isolate or identify the first sound in a word, it can also be called an onset. Recognizing that words can begin with the same sound, like alliteration, big blue ball, all begin with B. Isolating the final sound in a word or the medial or vowel sound. Another skill we'd work with is blending, being able to put parts of a word together, working with larger units of language for phonological awareness, blending two words into a compound word, blending syllables, body coda blending, onset rhyme, and then blending those individual sounds. This progression from larger units of language to individual phonemes is that phonological to phonemic awareness progression, and it is important. It lays that foundation for our students. Working with larger units is often easier than hearing these individual sounds. Teaching students to say cup, cake, cupcake, they might be able, that's much easier than hearing up and putting those three sounds together to make the word cup. So we can work in a progression of slowly getting to smaller till we're working with individual sounds. Blending is putting together. Segmenting is taking apart. And you'll see a similar sequence. Segmenting a compound word into two individual words, segmenting words into individual syllables, segmenting a spoken word into onset and rhyme, and segmenting a word into phonemes or sounds. Phoneme manipulation is often considered our most advanced or complex activity. We can manipulate parts of words like syllables or sounds by adding, deleting, and substituting those parts or sounds to make new words. Now you'll notice, especially for those areas of blending, segmenting, and manipulation, is that we don't just stay with large units of language, we work to the phoneme level. Because we want to make sure our students can hear these individual sounds in words. As we work with our students at the phoneme level, they are becoming phonemically aware, and then we want them to be phonemically proficient, because awareness is not enough. We have to help students be proficient at the phoneme level. And the way to do that is to provide explicit instruction to this individual sounds. David Kilpatrick, in his book, Equipped for Reading Success, says that phonemic awareness is a cognitive and linguistic skill that is needed to store words for immediate and effortless retrieval. That we must be able to work with individual sounds, being proficient with blending, segmenting, and manipulating phonemes in order to be that automatic decoder of print. Now we work our way towards working with phonemes, but making sure our students are at the phoneme level is important. Now, as we look at this list of skills, we can see that there are multiple activities that can be happening, and multiple skills can be taught simultaneously, providing repeated and intentional practice and exposure during each and every lesson. You can work with skills like rhyme and phoneme isolation and blending and segmenting all at the same time, working with a few words for each of those skills or activities in that quick oral and auditory lesson. When we start to work with phoneme manipulation, this actually requires students to be able to isolate, blend, and segment. So we need these other skills almost as prerequisites for manipulation. So I don't want you to walk away thinking I can only teach rhyme for phonemic or phonological awareness instruction, but rather, how can I teach multiple skills in a systematic way, working from largest units of language to individual sounds, to provide my students with practice and help them to become phonologically and phonemically aware, and then be proficient with the sounds they hear in words. Now, as a teacher and as an educator, I want to share with you examples of each of these skills and activities. And I have included grade levels or grade level expectations for each of these parts of phonological and phonemic awareness. And so that as you think about this, bringing this into your own practice and classroom instruction, you can have ideas of what your lessons might look like. As we work with our preschool or maybe transitional kindergarten students, kindergarten and then first grade. And you will see this for each of the skills you just saw on the previous slide. That first skill we talked about was the skill of rhyme. When we work with rhyming, this is often considered an early phonological awareness skill. And rhyming is something that many of our kids automatically learn. Picture books are full of rhyming words. We often have that language play and that rhythm within some of our picture books that our students catch on to, or our own children catch on to when we're reading aloud. As we work with the skill of rhyme, it's important to help students understand what rhyming words are. Because we sometimes say things like rhyming words sound the same, or rhyming words sound alike, where rhyming words they do sound alike and they do sound the same, but the part that is alike and the same is the middle and final sounds, the rhyme, R-I-M-E. Because words like pick and park have some of the same sounds, but they're not rhyming words. And so helping our students really shape their understanding of what rhyming is. We can say to them, ick, arc. Ick and arc are close, but not quite the same. Those words don't rhyme. But a word that does rhyme with pick is the word sick. Ick, ick. They rhyme because we hear ick in both words, helping students to identify what's the same when they're repeating or hearing rhyming words. Now, as we move into throughout the preschool year, we can move beyond rhyme repetition and get into recognition and production after we've given lots of practice with hearing and repeating words that rhyme. In kindergarten, we can introduce with rhyme repetition and then help get into recognition as well as production with rhyming words. Rhyme recognition often takes place with students hearing two words and indicating if words rhyme or they don't. Net, note. Do those words rhyme? We can help them break it apart. At, oat. Those are not rhyming words. We can move beyond those two-word rhyme recognition to which word rhymes with. Which word rhymes with red, said, or rug? That's a more complex rhyme recognition activity. We would not write the words out for them. Said and read don't have the same spelling pattern, but we're hearing them spoken aloud and they'd be able to hear read, said are rhyming words. As we get into that more complex skill of rhyme production, generating or producing words that rhyme, students would be coming up with a word that rhymes with a word or maybe a word family I say aloud. Tell me a word that rhymes with sat. And for you, you might have thought immediately of 4 or 5 words right away that rhyme with sat. Rhyme production requires initial sound manipulation or substitution, which is a much more complex skill. When we work with sat and we would rhyme it with, make a rhyming word like hat, we're substituting the s for a h and we have the word hat. So as we work, building up to that skill is important, helping them to hear what rhyming words sound like, recognize them, and then ask to produce. Even with our first graders, working with rhyme recognition, it's with a little more complex activity. Which 2 words rhyme? Giving them 3 words aloud. Lake, cake, get. Or which word doesn't rhyme from my series of words? That's even more difficult to identify the rhyming words and say aloud the non-rhyming word. Getting into rhyme production again with that initial sound manipulation is something that we often see in our first grade classrooms as part of our phonological or phonemic awareness instruction. Rhyme can be really fun. Students can have a lot of fun producing real words or nonsense words as we work with rhyming activities. The next skill we're going to talk about is phoneme isolation. this phonemic awareness skill of being able to identify phonemes or sounds in words. When we look at the foundational skill standards for kindergarten and first grade classrooms, we often see that students will be able to identify or isolate the initial, medial, and final sound as an expectation. Again, this is happening in an oral and auditory activity. With our littlest learners in pre-K classrooms, we start with initial sounds, that first sound we hear in a word. We might talk about the first sound in their own name, or bring that into work with, alphabet knowledge, or starting to talk about the words we see around our classroom. We can talk about alliteration, words that begin with the same sound. And we can start to isolate the final or the last sound we hear in words. Being able to say, my word is big. Big begins with B. Or when we think about final sounds, my word is cave. Cave ends with that sound we hear last in the word. In our kindergarten as well as our first grade classrooms, we add in medial sounds, working with initial sounds, final sounds, and then medial sounds. Initial sounds are often the easiest to hear. Then we isolate final, then we get into working with those vowels or medial sounds in words, isolating short vowel sounds, long vowel sounds. And as we get into first grade, working with more advanced vowel sounds, R-controlled vowels, or matching that to what we're working on in our phonics instruction. What vowel patterns or what are we working on with words for our phonics lessons? Also within phoneme isolation, we can work with oddity tasks, similar to what we saw with rhyme, with the series of words, being able to say which two words begin with the same sound. Bus, barn, cat. Which two words have that same initial sound? Or being able to identify which one doesn't belong. That's that categorization piece, being able to identify and listen for things that are the same or different. As we start to move through initial, final, medial, this phoneme isolation activity, as I mentioned, is a prerequisite for working with phoneme manipulation when we start to add and delete and substitute sounds in words. Again, it's happening in an oral and auditory lesson. We're not asking our students to write or spell any of the words. Now, the next skill we see is the skill of blending. Blending is taking parts of a word and putting it together into a spoken word, or putting it together into a whole word. Now, this is something that I mentioned, moving from largest units of language all the way to individual sounds, from phonological to phonemic awareness. We might work with blending two words, individual words, into a compound word, blending syllables. When we work with words or syllables, we're taking these large units and putting them together. Rainbow, rainbow, or everyone, everyone. We can start to show how we can put these two words together to make a big word. Same thing with syllables, to be able to say, listen, picnic, picnic, or elbow, elbow. We start with the parts and we say them fast or blend them together. Even starting to work with longer multisyllabic words, words that have 3, 4 syllables. President, president. Being able to blend those syllables into a word. These next two rows are something that you might be not as familiar with phonological awareness instruction, but it's working with two parts of a word. Body coda blending takes the first two sounds and puts it together, and the final sound is in isolation. Back, back. We find this is easier for our learners because the larger unit comes first and the final sound is isolated. Seek, seek. Being able to hear each of those parts and blend them together. With our first graders, we can even work with those ending consonant clusters. Lift, lift. Onset rhyme is that last step of phonological awareness. Word, syllable, body coda, onset rhyme are all phonological awareness activities for blending, and onset rhyme is our last piece. Being able to blend the two parts of a word together. Back, back. Eed, read. Old, bold. Then when we get to that bottom row, we are working with phonemic awareness. We're blending phonemes into words. And this is something we can even provide a more systematic progression with as well. We've worked from largest to individual sounds, largest units of language to sounds. And even within the phoneme level, we can start with 2 phoneme words and then build up to 3 phoneme words and then 4 phoneme words. So we can even slowly increase the level of difficulty or complexity as we work with the same skill of blending with our learners. Saying to students, a, may. Now, if that's too challenging, we can always have students melt the sounds together, which means rather than saying each phoneme individually, a, may, we can say, listen, may. I don't stop my voice in between, but show how we can really melt those sounds into a complete word. That can sometimes be a support or a scaffold for some of our learners who might struggle with this new skill. Hearing sounds individually, remembering those sounds, that phonological memory piece can be a challenge for some of our learners. So providing some of those supports can be helpful. We can work with words that have 3 sounds, 4 sounds, separating out a consonant blend into individual sounds that we hear. O, I, t, flight. We can blend 4 sounds into a complete word. This skill of blending transfers to print as students begin to decode or read words. And when we think about our students who are just learning to read, we know how important developing alphabet knowledge is, knowledge of letter names and sounds, so that when they see a letter in print, they can match it to a sound, say that sound out loud. If they came across the letters T, O, and P, we would hope our student would say t, a, p. But now what? They need to know how to blend those 3 sounds into a complete word. That is what the phonemic awareness skill of blending teaches without those letters in front of them. So then when they do come across those letters in print and they say those sounds aloud, t, a, p, they're able to blend top, putting those sounds together to make or read that word. Blending is considered a basic phonemic awareness skill. And working not just with those larger units of language is important, but making sure we're working at the phoneme level. Blending phonemes into words is so important for our students to be decoders of print. Now, blending and segmenting are opposites, but they're both considered basic phonemic awareness skills. Blending with parts to whole, segmenting is whole to parts. You'll see a similar progression as we work from word, syllable, onset rhyme, those phonological awareness components, before we get to individual phonemes and sounds. Similar to what we saw for blending, we're going to now be taking a word apart. Outside, outside, or understand, understand. Can we segment a word into syllables? We sometimes have used this activity with our learners by clapping or counting the syllables in words. That can be brought in as well. My word is candy, can-D, or vacation, vay-K-shun. When we get to that last level of phonological awareness with onset rhyme, we're segmenting our word into 2 parts. The first sound and then the rhyme, the vowel and all the letters after. My word is miss, is. My word is bus, us. When we get down to that phoneme level, we're working with phonemic awareness. We've laid the foundation with phonological awareness for this skill, and when we start to segment a word into individual sounds, students are taking a word apart, separating into all of the sounds they hear. My word is bee. What sounds do we hear? B, E. Or my word is sheep. Sh, E, P. Now in phonemic awareness, in the segmenting lesson, this is staying oral and auditory. But when your students want to write or spell a word, they can use this activity of segmenting, being able to take a word apart into individual sounds to help them write or spell that word. My word is sheep. What sounds do we hear? Sh, E, P. We can even count the phonemes or identify 3 sounds in the word sheep. Now we need to write a letter for each of these 3 phonemes or sounds we hear. So what letter says sh? What letters say E? What letter says P? So we can use this skill of segmenting in our writing as our students go to write and spell. When we think about our littlest learners, our preschoolers, our kindergartners who are using that invented spelling, this gives them the tools they need to really be able to listen for those sounds in words. And as we work with older learners, a child's spellings of words, especially if we look at a word they spelled independently or on their own, and perhaps it was incorrect, can give us a window into their understanding of sounds. What are they missing in this word? With a word like brave, did they just get 3 sounds? B-A-V? Let's listen for all the sounds in the word. B, R, A, V. We hear 4 sounds in that word. We need 4 letters that match each of those sounds. As we look at a student's writing, it is evidence of their understanding of phonemic awareness. Now, as we think about blending and segmenting, these basic skills that transfer to decoding and encoding, there might be some students who need additional support around these activities. Perhaps you're familiar with Alconen boxes, where chips or counters would be used to represent sounds. Again, we wouldn't put the words or letters in front of the students during the phonemic awareness lesson. That can happen during phonics. But we could use Alconen boxes or felt squares or tiles or even Unifix cubes to represent sounds for students. How they can touch each sound, be able to anchor those sounds to a visual to provide additional support. As I mentioned, segmenting transfers to print. This is an example of kindergarten writing. It's actually my youngest daughter, Nora's, from this past fall. When she wanted to write her sentence to match her writing, I made a leaf pile. And so using what she knows about sounds, matching those graphemes or letters to the sounds that we hear in words. This is the transfer that we want to see for our students to be able to take these sounds we hear out loud, match them into print when they want to write. Now, phoneme manipulation is our last skill that we're talking about. And within phoneme manipulation, we work with adding, deleting, as well as substituting. Adding and deleting are opposites of each other. We add, we delete, we can take it away. We can work with adding and deleting with syllables, as well as phonemes or sounds. Saying to students, if I said big and add the word is bigger. Or we could take it apart. The word is bigger. Without what's left is big. See, can we take something away and then hold on to that phonological memory of what remains? Adding and deleting with syllables is something we can work on even with our youngest learners, our preschoolers and our kindergartners, as well as our first graders. We can add and delete with phonemes or sounds as well. Say add s at the beginning, and the word is at, sat, being able to put those 2 parts together. We might need to bring in support for students, helping them to remember the 2 parts of the word to actually be able to blend those, the initial sound, the onset, and the rhyme into a complete word. Or we can delete the first sound. Sat without s, what's left is at. We can work with skill with CBC, simpler words, or we can even work with more complex words. Say end, add b, and the word is bend. Say bend without b, what's left is end. As we work with these skills with some of our kindergartners, our first graders, we might start to work with adding and deleting a sound at the end of a word. Say hi, add k, and the word is hike. Or we can take it away. Say hike without k, what's left is high. As we start to work with some more complex words with our first graders, we can start to add an initial sound to create a consonant blend. Say low, add s at the beginning, and the word is slow. Or say slow without s, what's left is low. We were able to separate apart those 2 sounds of the consonant blend. We can even work with a more complex skill like adding a second sound to create a consonant blend. Say side, add ul after s, and the word is slide. Or say slide without ul, the word is side. Being able to play with language, being able to take away, add and delete sounds from different parts of words, the beginning, the end, or even that second sound we hear. As we work with manipulation with substitution of sounds, this is often considered advanced phonemic awareness. It's an advanced skill that is required for our students to be able to map those sounds to print. And as we think about phoneme proficiency, this is where these advanced skills, deletion and substitution with phonemes, are especially important. We can work with substituting the initial sound in a word, or before that, we can work with substituting syllables. Say walking, change walk to run, and the word is running. Being able to change that syllable and make a whole new word. When we substitute that initial phoneme or sound, you may have remembered when I talked about rhyme, I mentioned this is required for rhyme production. When we say go and we change g to n, the new word is no. Initial sound substitution is actually required for students to be able to produce a rhyming word. So as we think about working with rhyme production, we might be talking about this more advanced skill. When we substitute that initial sound, we can say there, change the to sh, and the word is share. We not just like we saw for adding and deleting, we can manipulate the final sound in a word. My word is might. Change t to s, and the word is mice. Or can we change the vowel sound in a word? My word is net. Change F to O, and the word is note. Being able to change those sounds again without ever seeing the words in print, because it's all part of our language play. As we think about the skills we just walked through, rhyme, phoneme isolation, blending, segmenting, and manipulation, it's important to think about the complexity within each of those skills and activities. In an article that was published in the Reading Teacher a few years ago, it said that focusing early phonemic awareness instruction on blending, segmenting, and manipulating phonemes has been shown to produce greater improvements in phonemic awareness in future reading children and young children than time spent on rhyming and alliteration. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't use those activities, but what it does mean is we want to make sure we go beyond them, that we don't just focus our phonological and phonemic awareness instruction on rhyme and on alliteration or phoneme isolation, but that we work with our students on blending and segmenting and manipulating phonemes, moving through those phonological awareness components, words, syllables, onset rhyme, getting to that phoneme level so that they can be phonemically aware. A few takeaways as we wrap up our time together today. So you think about classroom application for your own phonological and phonemic awareness instruction. Instruction should focus on more than one skill in a lesson. That means you might be working with blending, segmenting, manipulation, all with the same activity in the same lesson. You might be working with rhyming and phoneme isolation and blending in a lesson. So you don't need to focus your entire time on just one skill, but rather being intentional, explicit, working with larger units of language and then sounds. As I said, the lessons are quick. Plan on around 10 minutes for phonological and phonemic awareness instruction in your classroom each day. Teach your lessons in a systematic progression from largest units of language like syllables, onset rhyme, and then sounds. We don't want to jump right in with our littlest learners and expect them to be at the phoneme level, but working through that phonological awareness continuum, larger units of language to sounds. The instruction is oral and auditory. The words are not shown in print. We're not creating things for our students. We aren't even using pictures. All we need is language. It's language play within our classroom instruction. According to David Kilpatrick, phonemic awareness and letter sound skills are not optional. They are central in the process of permanent word storage and sight vocabulary development. Either we're going to leave children on their own to figure it out for themselves, or we will directly train them. They cannot read efficiently without these skills. And this is so true. As you think about using what you've learned today and applying it to your own classroom instruction, I hope you see the importance of phonological and phonemic awareness. Considering the important role that phonemic awareness plays in building foundational reading, it's clear that we want to include this as part of our classroom instruction. All students can benefit from being taught how to isolate, blend, segment, and manipulate sounds in words. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me for this session today. I hope you were able to learn something new and take some of the ideas into your own classroom instruction.